The United States is under a crushing debt burden, and it has the potential to change everything we know, from investing, to housing, to the food you eat. And that's because Congress now has to decide if they're going to raise the debt limit another time. In this video, we're going to be discussing how the US debt got to where it's at, and at what point it's going to start becoming a problem for not just the US, but potentially the world. Naturally, most people think that debt is okay, and that can be proven in a couple of different ways. It's not just the US government that has increased its debt over the last couple of years. It's actually US private debt has increased as well. It's up to $16.9 trillion. If we look at the US federal debt, it has been increasing by a lot. And if someone, and by someone I mean Congress, doesn't do something about it soon, it's going to cause issues and be a problem for us in the near future. And that's because of two different reasons. First, the federal debt, even if we don't continue to spend more money, is actually going to get worse. And that's because the Federal Reserve is in the process of increasing interest rates. And while that stops consumer spending, it doesn't help with federal spending. It actually increases it. This is because the government has a lot of debt, and their federal funds rate has stayed relatively flat and low for the last 10 years. That's allowed the government to get a really great interest rate on their debt because they have a AAA rating, which is the highest rating you can get. But now that the Federal Reserve is increasing their interest rates, and that's making all interest rates go up, it's actually causing a lot of problems and making the federal government's debt very expensive. And that expense is hitting us here at home. That federal debt interest payment alone is $475 billion a year. And that's because these interest payments are going up, but it's also because we're spending more and financing more of our debt. That $475 billion looks like this. Yeah, that's a big number. Now that we've seen how big this number is and we know what's causing it, we can easily fix this, right? Sadly, the solution just isn't that easy. There are many people in Congress that want to cut spending, but they can't really decide where to cut that spending at. Then there's others that want to just simply worry about it later. And let's talk about those people that want to worry about it later, because I don't think they understand the dire consequences that they're putting on future generations. The people that are saying that they want to worry about the debt later probably think they're making the right statement. This could be for political reasons or for the economy. Now let's assume they actually are meaning this for the economy. And unfortunately, that just means they have a poor understanding of how debt affects an economy and the benefits and negative effects of it. Debt can be extremely useful as a point of leverage, or you can use it in a time of need. But that requires that debt be paid down over time, and that's currently not what we're doing. Unfortunately, we're acquiring more and more debt, and that's making that new money worth less and less. Unfortunately, as you acquire more debt, its usefulness does not outweigh the cost. If we look at the United States debt to GDP, we can see that as of the fourth quarter of 2022, we're at a 121.3% debt to GDP ratio. Naturally, I see this and I think, is this good or is this bad? And unfortunately, the answer just isn't that clear. But let me try to provide you with some facts so you can come to your own understanding. We can look at some sources, and although there is not an agreed upon amount, we can see here that this study is stating that 90% debt to GDP is when economies start to experience an adverse effect from its debt. If we take this study seriously, that means that we are well past the government debt, leaving a positive impact on the economy. I'll be the first to say that this factor alone should not be the only thing making you think that we're going to have an unstable economy and that we're going to go bankrupt as a country. Although it should be noted that this can start as a yellow flag for you and start to get into a red flag territory of where debt to GDP ratio starts to become an issue. A time period from the past that we can look at that actually had similar issues is 2008. The housing crisis is a perfect example of how over-leverage can really cause some issues. US household debt was over 100% to GDP, and since the 2008 housing crisis, it's really came back down. And that's because it couldn't sustain that level. It was too high. It was above that 90% limit that we were talking about. On the other hand though, that debt didn't simply go away. That debt was actually moved from the housing sector over into the US economy. And that's because the government needed drastic measures to make sure that the economy did not completely collapse. They took on the burden, and while it did put a band-aid on the situation and fix the housing market, it actually made the US economy worse in the long run. Overall, it's likely that the government won't go into bankruptcy, and that the Democrats and Republicans will fight it out for a few more weeks and then come to a resolution on the debt ceiling. And at the end of the day, they're going to raise it. They have to. But for the future, we need to start thinking about what kind of impact this national debt is having on not just our current economy, our future economy, but the economy around the world. as one small hiccup could really impact us greatly, and as we're such a global economy now and everything works together, it's really impactful if one small piece goes bad. Please feel free to leave a comment below and let me know what you think about the US debt and how it's going to affect not just the US economy, but the world. If you enjoyed this type of content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and consider liking this video. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one.